Well, thank you. Welcome to another episode of the Black Men Speak podcast. I'm your host, Keith Dent, and I know it's been a while since we've been together. We missed the show a couple of weeks ago due to some scheduling conflicts with our guests, but and that happens, I guess, in showbiz. And but tonight we're in for a real great treat. I'm really excited about tonight because we're going to be talking about probably a topic that most black men don't really talk about. And as you know, if you may have not have known, April was Stress Awareness Month, and so we wanted to point out that untreated mental health disorders and unmanaged stress are silent killers of black men. Adult blacks are about 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems compared to the general population, and only 6.6% of black men use mental health services. So, some of those common main stresses are, money and finances, which, as due to lack of economic opportunities, kind of to make ends meet, our negative racial experience from institutionalized, personal, and internalized racism, our jobs and career, difficulties finding a job or, even keeping the job and succeeding in their careers, relationship, family issues, and then health and illness due to lack of good diet, chronic disease, and exercise. So one of those exercises that can help alleviate stress is yoga. And yoga, if you don't know what that is, it's a mind-body practice that combines physical poses, controlled breathing, and meditation. And yoga may help reduce stress, lower blood pressure, and lower heart rate. And almost anyone can do it. But in the media, yoga is not something that is where you're going to see black men doing yoga, or it's even won't really find a lot of it in our community. So therefore, it's hard for us to get into the practice. But things are changing. That's changing. If you haven't seen, especially for black men, there's a Black Male Yoga Initiative by Chenga Bell that's out of Baltimore, which promotes holistic education and supports and engages men and boys of color. And then also, we have two guests on tonight that have kind of used yoga as a way of life. We have Yirser Ra Hotep. He's one of the oldest yoga practitioners in the United States, and he's a brother, y'all. And we have Quentin Vennie. He turned to yoga as a way to heal himself from anxiety, depression, and addiction. So I'm going to bring them both up. And I just want to say hello. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing well.
Welcome to the show.
I'm doing fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you guys are on, because I know tonight we're really going to dive into not just about yoga, the practice, but how you used yoga to heal and then maybe help others to heal as well. So let's just get into before we get into that a little bit. Yirser, tell me a little bit about yourself and why and how long you've been in yoga. What do you like about yoga itself?
Well, I started practicing yoga about 46 years ago, and that was somewhere in the mid 1970s. And the reason that I wasn't really attracted, like a lot of men, because I know this is focused on black men, right? Like a lot of men, I wasn't really interested in yoga per se. I didn't really know what yoga was, but I was persuaded to go and take a class by a sister, right? And
okay.
So I went to the class and I really loved the yoga. And my teacher was a male teacher. He was a His name is Dr. Yirser Ra Hotep. And so I started the practice. Before I started practicing yoga, I had decided that I was going to use holistic modalities as a way to heal myself, because I too, I didn't really realize the degree that it was back then, but I think I was suffering from depression. I felt bad a lot, and so I used a lot of drugs and alcohol and stuff, to partly was to deal with the depression, but the other part of it because back in those days, because this is something I studied back in the 60s, it was like it was part of the culture, so we use psychedelics and things like that, but when I turned 21, I decided I was going to stop all of that, and that's how I got into the path of holistic health. That's how I got into yoga. And so when I went to the yoga class, I was expecting to see like a little skinny man from India wearing a diaper, this whole stereotype. And so I saw this big, tall brother, 6'5", black brother from the west side of Chicago, and he could do all of these different postures, and I couldn't do anything. I was a vegan. I was really a raw foodist, and I would run and I would do calisthenics and stuff, but my body was real stiff. But he could do anything with his body in terms of any type of yoga posture you could think of. But he told me that his knees used to pop out of place, that he had a sway back, and people used to make fun of him because of his structure of his body, and how he had corrected his whole body, his whole structure to his body, his knees, through practicing yoga. And so I said, well, if you can do it, then I can do it. And so I liked yoga from the perspective that, I liked the class, even though I couldn't do anything, I liked the relaxation, So when we laid down on the floor and we did the total relaxation position, we call it the mummy pose, right?
Okay.
I could feel, I just felt so good from that deep relaxation that, it motivated me to want to keep doing it. So, so that's how I got started. And then eventually I started to teach it. Eventually I started to train teachers to become, I started to train people to become teachers. So I started to train trainers. And so I started my school, Yoga Skills School of Kemetic Yoga, where we train people to become yoga teachers. And we also do a lot of work internationally in Africa and Brazil and Jamaica and all kinds of different places in Europe, New Zealand, Australia. We do work all over the place, especially working with young people, with youth. South Africa, Tanzania, we do it with Ghana, we do things all over the world because we're trying to, help our community throughout the whole diaspora. And we see yoga as a healing, technology, and as a something that that's going to be very positive for the development of our community.
That's great. Thank you. And what about you, Quentin?
My journey was something very similar. I was diagnosed with severe generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and mild to severe major depressive disorder. And, I endured a 2-year addiction to prescription pills, fell into a severe bout of depression, attempted suicide twice, survived an accidental overdose, and very similar, decided that it was important for me to start fighting to live instead of living to die. And, from that point, really dove into a more holistic way of being. I was running a personal training business at the time, so I understood the significance of how diet, how it contributed to how we felt physically. but had no idea how it contributed to how we felt mentally. During this process of healing and recovery, I feel like yoga found me. It was something that I had avoided for quite some time. I had a negative association to it. I thought it was, to be honest, I thought it was a weird sex cult that only white people engaged in. I would see it at the gym, and you would see a group of people walk in with no shoes on their feet, and they go in the room, and the curtains would be put down, and they'd have candles lit, and nobody was allowed in there. And then an hour later, they'd come out sweaty, and then they'd leave the same way they came. Right. And I never saw anybody that looked like me, never saw anyone that represented me,
Right.
and I was like, okay, this may be something that they're into, and I'm good on that. After really, I'm a firm believer in, our gut being God. And there was something that kept drawing me to this practice. I would see it everywhere. I would see community classes at the billboard or at Wegmans, or it was in the Aflac commercial, right? Like it was everywhere. And I was like, okay, obviously the universe or somebody, God, or whoever, is telling me that I need to try this thing. And I did, and fell in love with it immediately. It helped me to really come back to myself and recognize who I was protecting and hiding from for so long.
Wow, that's great. And so, since you guys both kind of have similar stories, how long did it take to be in the practice until when you started to feel the benefits of yoga, whereby you said you felt you needed to adopt this as a lifestyle? Quentin,
Well,
you can go first.
Well, for me, it was the first time I did it got me hooked on it.
Oh, the first time. Okay.
Yeah, because I like to be high, right? So, but I didn't want to be high off any type of drugs, and so yoga, in a sense, made me high, in the sense of making me feel light, in the sense of making me feel good inside, in the sense of making, changing my attitude and giving me energy. So after the first class, even though I wasn't real flexible, the poses that I did to the degree that I was able to get my body into them, and then the deep breathing that I did and the deep relaxation that I did, allowed me to have that internal experience that made me feel really connected to myself, connected to my breath, connected to the rest of the world. And I was sort of on a vibe like that before I even started to practice yoga, because when I changed my diet and I stopped eating meat, I stopped eating processed foods. All I ate was fruit and nuts and seeds, and drink water and drink tea, because that's all I didn't know how to prepare like a vegetarian meal. So I felt so good from doing that, and I started to learn how to just do different types of internal concentration type of things. And when I would go outside in the park and sit down, I felt like I was connected to the grass and to the ground and to the trees and the squirrels and the birds. I just felt connected. So yoga just gave me an intensified feeling of that connectedness to the universe, so to speak, but especially within myself, where my mind and my body felt integrated with each other.
Okay, great. Quentin, what about you?
Yeah, it was very much the same way, right? Like my first practice didn't come, I didn't go to a studio. I actually found a video on YouTube and practiced in my living room. Again, I was a personal trainer, but I had my first panic attack in the gym during a workout. And so I was afraid for months, to put my body into any kind of physical activity where my heart rate would increase, because that would often trigger my anxiety. And yoga was the one physical modality that I was able to use where I was still able to get physical, still able to feel that physical challenge that yoga provides, and not have to run the risk of my anxiety increasing. It actually helped to reduce the symptoms of my anxiety. So, I'm once I realized that it was actually something that was attainable, and I enjoyed, I stuck with it.
Great. So you guys both have kind of similar stories, which is fantastic. But of course, as we know, we don't really see ourselves in yoga in the media, whether it be on TV commercials or like print media. So I don't know, and it's starting to change, but we have a difficulty going into the practice. So one question I have, and may be helpful for our brothers, is to kind of break down what isn't yoga. What isn't that? What is it that will help our brothers and maybe break down some of those obstacles?
I guess for me, yoga isn't ego, right? Yoga isn't stereotype. Yoga isn't prejudice, right? These are often the things and the things that we tell ourselves because we have these associations of what yoga is because of Western culture. Not realizing that the practice of yoga exists in our genetic makeup, right? It is a part of our DNA. And I think when we let go of ego, when we let go of the fear of criticism and of what someone else is going to think of us because of what we're doing, then we open up a door of opportunity for us to really identify who we are, whether through the practice or outside of it. And so, for us in our culture, we're so consumed with the perception, right, of what someone's going to believe us to be, that we often lose who we truly are, just in general, right? And I think for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but my practice actually helped me to identify who I was. Because if I allowed society, because my entire life I allowed society to tell me who I was, who I wasn't, who I would be, and who I never would be, right?
Wow.
And so
Okay.
I walked around with this cloak of judgment on me my entire life
On yourself.
until I got tired of being confined to a box, right? And said, what do I have to lose if I already have nothing, right? So it's like I have nothing else to gain. I was living a life that was void of happiness, that was void of confidence, that in a lot of ways I felt was void of love. I tried to kill myself twice. What can a person do to me that I didn't try to do to myself? Right. And so for me to be afraid of someone else's judgment was asinine at that point. Right. And so I think we have to let go of these stereotypical ideas of what this practice is, and just find a way to identify what it can be for us individually.
You agree? Yirser, do you agree with that?
I agree with all of that. And to add to it, I would say that yoga isn't it isn't only for women. It isn't only for white people. It isn't only for rich people. It isn't a religion. Yoga is to me, it's a system for self-development, right? Because it involves and it isn't an exercise. Even though they teach it in health, they teach a version of yoga in health clubs and stuff. And it's the most popular, exercise system in the world, but it is not an exercise in the strictest sense of the word. And I want to talk about that too a little bit based upon something that Quentin said.
Okay.
But so I would say yoga is not those things. And just to say, okay, yoga is not a religion. So some people say they don't want to do yoga because they think it's a religion. They think that it comes from Hinduism. They think that when you practice yoga, that you have to say things in a language that you don't know, like in the Sanskrit language, and that you're chanting and you're worshiping different gods and stuff like that. We break down yoga scientifically, and we practice yoga from the perspective of what type of internal effect is it going to allow me to have. So the first way of experiencing yoga is going to be through your body, and it's going to be through your breath. Everybody has breath, and you use your breath to do something which I call activate the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So something that Quentin said triggered me when he said that exercise would trigger his was it anxiety?
Anxiety. Mm-hmm.
Because when you exercise, and exercise is good, but when you exercise, you actually are stimulating the sympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system, which raises blood sugar, raises your blood pressure and things like that, to a degree why you become fit. But when you practice yoga, it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your heart rate. So it would have the opposite effect of a panic attack or anxiety attack, right? So it would calm you down. It would lower heart rate. It would make your blood sugar levels reduce and things like that. And that's why it's a health building system. That's why it's a system for self-development. The more you practice yoga, the more that you begin to reprogram the physiology of your body, and the physiology of your body would help to reprogram your mind and your thoughts and your emotions. Because every thought we have, every emotion we have is attached to a physiological reaction and a biochemical reaction in the body. And so when we practice controlled deep breathing, that's all you got to do. When you want to learn yoga, if you don't do nothing else, you learn controlled deep breathing, and you practice that every day, several times a day, and you would change your whole orientation of who you are, how you feel, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others, how you relate to the world. Just doing that one small practice within the whole universe of what yoga has to offer, can be very transformational.
Wow.
And also, the final thing I'm going to say is that yoga is not only from India. Yoga is also from Africa and other indigenous people around the world.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that, because I know that you practice a different type of yoga, and we're going to talk about those differences. So
okay.
So yes, so I came across this article in the Yoga Journal, and I wanted to read it and get your thoughts on it. So it basically was by the Yoga Journal by Terrell Jermaine Starr, and he started his yoga practice, and it took him about 4 months before he took a man's class. So, and he said he couldn't believe another man could be the source of healing and comfort. So my question was how, and I'm sure, I know Quentin didn't have a yoga practice, but might have maybe had some classes, but how have you overcome the assumption that men can't support other men in the yoga space?
I guess for me, the assumption that men can't support other men, that was never an assumption for me.
Okay.
That perception of support was ended a long time ago for me when, growing up, I didn't have a father. And then at 23, 24, I had a son of my own. And I taught my son the importance of vulnerability. I taught my son the importance of acknowledging and accepting his emotion, that he had the permission to be human. Um, I grew up with some very solid brothers that I'm still very, and I mean brother not in the relational sense, but brothers in the friendship sense that turned into family. And we supported one another in every dynamic, every dynamic and area of our lives. And so I learned very early on that men could support other men. And so whether it be a yoga practice, whether it be working out in the gym, and you got to get another guy to spot you when you're on the, when you on the bench, right? Like whatever it may be, that was never a part of my reality. The only support from a man I didn't get was from my own father. And that was because he had his own struggles in the streets with addiction. And once he got himself together, our relationship shifted. And so, that was never a perception for me. That was never a part of my reality.
Okay, great. Yirser?
Well, see, the brother that I don't know if I know the brother that you mentioned in the magazine, but see, when I have a whole different introduction to yoga than what most people do. I didn't learn yoga from anybody who learned it from an Indian perspective, right? In the beginning of our practice, we began it from an African-centered perspective because that was our consciousness when we went into it. And we already understood that yoga had an African origin. And so we maybe didn't have the exact information that we do now. But when I first started, I said, if all these other things come from Africa, yoga must come from Africa too. So I wasn't interested in learning all of these different words and Sanskrit. I wasn't interested in going to these studios where people go with these various types of teachers who are from a different culture than me, whether there's a white person or a person from India. It just wasn't interesting to me. So we learned yoga from we taught ourselves. We would look at the different books, but we would understand the information from our own perspective because everything that we learned, even if we went to a lecture to hear Swami Rama or somebody like that, we would still filter the information through our African consciousness, right? So the idea of not being able to get the nurturance from a man or something like that wasn't even like, what kind of, that's not even an issue. That's not even a thought. That's not even part of the consciousness that we had, So, my teacher was a man. My teacher was a black man who looked just like me. I took classes of other sorts from women, like I might have took African dance with Darlene Blackburn, who was my teacher, and people like that. But there was never an issue between male and female and all this kind of stuff, So, to me, that's something that you encounter if you're operating within that European construct of culture and that European construct of psychology. But once you step out of that matrix that they've created, these things are not necessarily an issue unless they're being imposed from some other source.
Right. Well, and that's deep since we have so we've kind of touched upon Africa, and I know you will practice Kemetic Yoga, which is from Africa, as opposed to the other yoga, which is primarily from India. So, for people that are listening tonight, what is Kemetic Yoga, and what makes it different from yoga that's out of India?
Well, what I want to say, because I have respect for all yoga, and all yoga is good. All yoga is yoga, right?
Right.
there are some differences. All yoga begins from a cosmological conceptualization, right? So there is a worldview that informs your philosophy and your practice of yoga. So the yoga that is being practiced in India, not necessarily being practiced in India, I'm going to say the mainstream yoga that's being practiced in the mainstream in the Western world that people think of as yoga is coming from a particular worldview, a particular orientation that dictates everything down into the practices, the way that the postures are done. Everything is dictated by that, right?
Okay.
So we see that the predominant yoga that people do is body yoga, right? They do up dog, down dog, warrior 1, 2, and 3. They do vinyasa flow sequences and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And it's very physical, and it's fast. You know, to me, you're going.
Yes, it is. It is fast. That's one thing that I struggle with. Like, wait, slow down so I can get into these poses. So
if you struggle, I struggle. You know, because I don't even take those classes. But in the times that I've done them, I have said this is too. I need a chance to inhale and exhale. This is not just a physical exercise for me. I see people teaching yoga classes. They never say inhale. They never say exhale. They never say breathe. They just doing stuff, you know, and it's like, you know, how is this yoga? So the foundation of yoga is the breath. But why is the foundation of Kemetic Yoga the breath? Because of our worldview. Our worldview in Kemetic Yoga comes from the concept that we call Ma'at, M-A-A-T. So Ma'at is symbolized by a woman with feathers on her arm in this position, right? With the arm stretched out, kneeling on one leg, twisting to the side with her arms extended. And the feathers on Ma'at's arms represent her ability to manipulate the force of the breath, which is contained in the air. So they call that breath in Indian yoga, they call that prana. In Kemet, we might have several words, but we might call it shu, because shu is the actual air itself. And we have other words that actually represent the life force in the air, like onk, which represents the idea of life. That's there, right? So the word ma'at means that the nature of the universe has 5 characteristics. Order, hope I don't forget one. Order, balance, order, balance, harmony, justice, and reciprocity, I think. So those 5 principles are the principles that you are trying to incorporate into your own personality matrix, your own self, your own being, your own mental, spiritual, psychological, psycho-emotional being. Those are the things. Balance, harmony, justice, reciprocity, order. You want to embody those things the way that you live your life. And so that worldview, that cosmology, that understanding of the nature of reality dictates to you that you have to breathe, because the breath, what we call shu, is the this invisible force, this invisible medium that we're surrounded and we exist in it. Just like a fish is existing in water. We are existing in a different medium than water. It's the air. It's the shu. And so we use the breath as the primary focus for our own nurturance and for our own self-transformation. And we use breath. So when we do our yoga practice, we're not only inhaling and exhaling on a mechanical level. Because if I go to the gym and I do a bench press, I'm going to inhale, exhale. That's not yoga. When you breathing yogically, you are breathing in such a manner, from a Kemetic perspective, right? You're breathing in such a manner that you are inhaling and you're trying to raise energy from the lower chamber of the body, below the navel, at the lowest area of your spine. And you're trying to draw that life force that exists there, that you were born with. You're trying to draw that life force and make it come up your spine and move to the middle of your forehead when you breathe in. And when you breathe out, you're trying to direct that energy through your arms into your hands. And at the same time, down your legs and into your feet. And so we see this process of inhaling, exhaling, moving the energy up the spine on the inhalation, through the arms and down through the arms, into the hands, down the legs, into the feet. We see this represented all over the landscape of ancient Kemet.
That's great.
And so that cosmology of Ma'at is informing our practice. So when we do our practice, we go slowly, we coordinate the breath, and we're trying to move energy. We use the movements and the postures primarily as a means to move energy and life force through the channels, because the channels, the energy channels that the life force is moving through, they can become clogged up, they can become blocked. And those blockages is what creates the mental and psychological instability, and also the physical ailments and illnesses and diseases that we have. So we say from our perspective that everything is coming from the ability to keep energy moving. And this concept is not foreign to Indian yoga, but the mainstream modern yoga, the way it's being practiced, they don't really focus on these things. And they oftentimes don't even focus on breathing, period.
Right. And so I know, Quentin, you turned to yoga to transform your life and Yirser. Thank you for that. That was fantastic. And so, but you took it a little farther. So, and you created what you'd call this Trinity of Wellness. So, I'd like you to touch upon that a little bit. How did you decide to kind of create that, and what has been kind of the result, and how has it changed your life?
First of all, Yirser, I have to thank you for that perspective. I think that is a very unique and important, I shouldn't even use the word unique. I think it is an important factor in a yoga practice that is not spoken about commercially and in Western culture. And so, like, I'm a firm believer as well. If you can breathe, you can do yoga. And so that changes the accessibility factor of it so much, right? Where, it is not reserved for, the Louis Vuitton buyers and the Soho loft livers, right? But it is really a modality and a practice that is and celebrates our humanity. So thank you for sharing that. The Trinity of Wellness for me, I wouldn't say that I created it as much as I would say that, it became, I'm an addict, and anyone who's struggled with any kind of addiction, you recognize that the addiction itself never goes away. The behaviors often shift to something else, right? And so the first modality that I started to practice within this healing journey was juicing. You know, I was one of those individuals who never liked to eat salad. I didn't like to eat my vegetables. I didn't like to eat, you know, a lot of fruit outside of watermelon and grapes, right? It wasn't something that, you know, I was really into. You know, even when I was working out, you know, I was you know, protein shake and, you know, grilled chicken and, you know, would barely eat, you know, my broccoli, you know. And so because even during healing, I still didn't want to eat my vegetables. I didn't want to eat salad. And so what better way to get those nutrients than to juice them, drink them, you know? And that's how I you know, I would mitigate a lot of the withdrawal symptoms with putting, you know, a significant amount of nutrients into my body. That helped, right? The discomfort there. And then from there, you know, I like to say, again, yoga found me. And so I started to practice, you know, the physical postures in yoga, you know. And then, you know, I would be in, I eventually branched out into a studio here in Baltimore and, you know, did an hour and 15-minute class and, you know, ended up laying on my back for 10 minutes and felt the most euphoria I've ever experienced, right? Outside of, you know, taking some kind of a drug or alcohol. And I was like, well, how can I experience this same feeling without putting my body into a pretzel for an hour and 15 minutes? Right. And that's when, you know, it was like, well, you can actually sit still and breathe intentionally. And essentially with what, you know, Yirser was talking about, like that's what was the foundation. Right. And so it became like yoga, meditation, and juicing. But you know, it all encompassed one another. Right. Like I was able to ingest the things that I needed in my body from a nutritional perspective, while still being able to get physical in my body from a physical perspective, and then having that connection to breath and to the universe and society and myself, right? And so those three things embodies to me, you know, practices that will help mitigate a lot of the symptoms and the diseases that we struggle with today. And so, you know, for some, you know, because of how it's packaged, right, it is a unique concept. But in reality, it's just providing ourselves psychologically, physically, and nutritionally all the things that we need to be our best selves as human beings.
Wow, that's great. But I guess then one of the things, I guess we would have to, I guess, change the paradigm of our communities, which is not, breathing is not one of the things. You know, we would say a lot of our, especially our black men, are under a lot of pressure, and I talked about the stressors earlier, and then also having the access to those, you know, nutrients, you know, from juicing, and so that can be a challenge. So how do we overcome those things?
Well, you know, when you practice yoga, and I'm going to say this, I don't want to get too metaphysical.
Okay.
But when you start to practice yoga, you change your vibrational frequency, right? And so people say, but what is that? Everything vibrates, right? So that's one of the seven, that's another part of our cosmology, the 7 laws of Tahuti. The white folks, they call it Hermetic philosophy. And they say 7 principles that go along with that. But Hermetic is named after Hermes. We call it Thoth, Tahuti. So these 7 principles, right? Everything vibrates. Everything starts with the mind. Everything is mental. So when you start to work with your mind and you start to do your practice with the breath, you start to change the vibrational frequency that your mind, your brain, your consciousness, your body, which is an antenna that receives information and projects information. You start to change those dynamics and you start to send out a signal that's of a different quality into the universe. This is like law of attraction stuff, right?
Right.
That they don't really explain to you correctly. You start to draw back to you other vibrational frequencies, other signals that provide you information. And so what I'm saying is that the answer and the solution to our problems are within us. And when we begin to look within, we find the answer, we find the solution to our own problems, to our own challenges that we have. Everything is within us. If we can, and it's not saying that you do not study external things, like you should. I have 3 or 4 degrees, right? Political science, social work. I have an Associate of Arts degree. I have a lot of different things. I've studied anthropology. I've studied all these different things, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't study things, you don't study the world, and you don't get that education, but you have to also get an education internally. And that's the part that we're missing. So you could be a political scientist, but if you don't know anything internally, then you only know half the game, because you only working with your left brain, you're not working with your right brain.
Okay.
Right? And if you talk to advanced psychologists, right, they understand this left brain, right brain issue that needs to be dealt with. They also understand this thing called epigenetics, about how your consciousness can change your genetic makeup. So it's a lot of different things like that we're working with yoga. So the first thing, so when I work with young people, right, because I'm a social worker, and I'm more retired social worker now, because I don't do all the same things I used to do. But when I work with young people, the first thing I do is I give them something to eat, because I'm working with young people that's from the hood, so they ain't got their stomach empty. Before I can say anything to them, talk to them, try to help them, I gotta feed them. The next thing I do, I teach them how to breathe, I teach them how to relax, I teach them how to go within, right? And then once they are able to release some of their anxiety, some of their tension, then we able to have a conversation, and we can talk on a real level. See? And so that's what you have to do. So we have to have conversations to look for solutions, to brainstorm solutions that's based upon that level of release of anxiety, what Quentin was referring to, like releasing the ego, because the ego is just your anxiety. The ego is just a false sense of yourself, where you're putting up defenses against what you feel like may be an attack, even though you're not even conscious that you're being defensive, right? So you put up this facade of a self that's not even real. So we have to break through all of those things. So before we can really develop, before we can really create the economic system that we need to have in order to become really self-empowered, we have to go within. And so, but just on a practical level, right? Back in the day, we said we got to form a co-op. Everybody get together, put their money together, and we cooperatively buy a whole bunch of vegetables and fruits from the market at the discount. We go to the place where the grocery stores get their stuff, and then we have a central distribution place
system, right?
And then everybody go there and they get the food. We have urban gardens, we have urban farming. So everybody get a piece of land, and you got all this vacant land out here. People learn how to farm it, learn how to take care of it, learn how to shelter the vegetables and the fruits and that kind of stuff. And then you have a community of people who work together. But you're not going to have the same level of cooperation unless everybody starts working with the breath, unless everybody starts to get into their meditation. They have to do something internally so that the external things that they do can be within Ma'at. Okay.
Great. Yep.
So
Awesome.
I hope that makes sense. I know we don't have the time.
I know.
But
we'll definitely have to do it again.
You got to listen to it and get the energy from what I'm saying. If it's not familiar, you got to get the energy because we're talking about energetic exchange.
Right. Anything to add on that, Quentin?
No, not really. I mean, I think he really covered a lot of it, right? We talk about urban gardens, we talk about co-ops, right? We talk about doing the work oneself. You know, like we have to do the work oneself in order for us to really build community in the way that, you know, that has been described. So, you know, anything that I would say would just be repetitive and maybe using different language, but it would be the same concept.
So let me ask you this, maybe ask it this way. So for the, you know, because since you're from Baltimore, you know, you were born and raised, correct? In Baltimore? And so
correct.
For people that were in your neighborhood that actually saw a change in you, did they make any changes based on your story? That you're
some people
share? Yeah,
some people, you know, I have one friend who you know, saved up his money and took him, his mother, and his sister to California because I had gone, and he was like, you're like me, you come from where I come from, you were able to do it, I can do it too, I just have to be disciplined. You know, same individual decided that he wanted to do something for himself that was above and beyond what he was doing. So he registered, got financial aid, and was able to go to Baltimore School for Massage, you know, and so, but then you have other people who, you know, are kind of stuck in their ways, and they can look at me and say, what you're doing is great, and I'm proud of you, but that's not for me, you know, and I have to respect that, you know. At the end of the day, it's all a mentality, right? It starts in the mind, you know, and everyone's not going to go on the journey with me. Everybody's not going to use my example. And for those who do, I'm here to provide it. And for those who don't, maybe one day they will, but if not, then they never were meant to.
So I mean, and that's an interesting perspective, because a lot of times, especially in our communities, we do tend to blame slavery and other things on our plight. But what I'm hearing from you, both of you, say is that if we go within, we can make the changes that we need to make, not only for ourselves, but for our communities at large. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think, you know, we can never remiss the fact that slavery and systemic racism and oppression and, you know, all of these things play a vital role in where we are as a culture and a society, how we feel about ourselves, the fact that our history has been stripped from us, right? To the point where, you know, even practices that are native to us are credited to everywhere else except us, right? The things that we've created, the laundromat, the traffic light, right? Like all of these things have been stripped from us, right? So when you constantly strip the successes and the achievements of a people, right, the purpose is to make them feel less than, because it's easier than to control, right? So we can't escape that reality. However, by going inside, by identifying who we truly are, it's not uncommon knowledge that we come from kings and queens. It's not uncommon knowledge that we come from a superior level of being, of thinking, of existing. It's not uncommon for knowledge of that. We have to strip away the ego, strip away this perception of who we are, and really start to break down and identify for ourselves who we have the potential of being, tapping back into that ancestral being, right? You have so many people who, you know, I mean, I know myself, I was one of them when I was young. It was like, I'm not going out in the yard. I'm not raking leaves. I'm not doing these things. And yet here I am 30 plus and I love gardening, you know, because this is what our culture was built on the earth, right? We are of the earth. And so because that's been stripped away from us, I grew up in West Baltimore. The grocery store didn't, you know, we didn't get our groceries locally. You know what I mean? That was not, we didn't have yards. You know, my grandmother had a small front yard with a little bit of grass. It took 3 minutes to mow. And then the backyard was all concrete and cement. Right. And so there are so many concepts and constructs that have been used against us. But we have the unique ability to overcome those things. And we see them represented in our culture every day.
Great. Yirser, anything on that?
Yeah, I agree with everything Quentin is saying. I think that we have to develop a belief in the unseen, that which cannot be seen. That's what yoga operates on a level that's below or subliminal, you know. And for example, you know, I'm gonna give you an example of a couple of things. When you're working with the mind, right? If this cup is the mind, the top of this cup right here, this is the conscious part of the mind, right? That's this. The rest of this is the subconscious. That's the rest of your mind. So the vast majority of your consciousness is subliminal. And your motivation for your behaviors, for your automatic thoughts, the things that you think, your first impressions and your first reactions to events and experiences that you have as they occur is being generated from the subconscious. And the subconscious or the subliminal aspect of our being is being programmed by our traumatic experiences that we're having. So so we're talking about men, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a man, somebody kick your ass, right? I hope I can say that. Somebody kick your ass, then that's trauma. If the police kick your ass, the police harass you, the police brings fear into your heart because you had to fear for your life. That's traumatic. But we have to keep on stepping. So what do? We sublimate that fear. We sublimate that negative feeling about ourselves into the subconscious, because that's how the mind deals with trauma. It sublimates it down. And so then, but then when you snap on somebody, it may be your wife, your woman, your kid, your whoever, your significant other, whoever that is, somebody close to you, somebody at your job, you snap on somebody, you don't even know, because it's snapping, because you don't know where it even came from. It came from the subconscious, right? It came from that internalized trauma. When you take those drugs, when you drink that alcohol, when you smoke those cigarettes, when you let yourself get out of shape because you're sitting around eating fried chicken and pizzas and stuff, right? All of that is trauma and stress, anxiety that is generating behaviors which are maladaptive and self-destructive. And that's what we're working with. We are killing our own selves. So we can say slavery, police brutality, white supremacy, the institutionalized racism, all of those things are true. But how are we going to react to them? What is going to be our response? It's a chess match. The dude over here, these people are, you know, when I say these people, I'm not talking about individual, I'm talking about this culture that we are confronted with in terms of Western culture. It's our enemy, so to speak, right? Because It's not the people. I don't deal with people. I deal with the whole system, the whole matrix of the structure that we exist in. We exist in a milieu, in an environment that is oppressive. And so how are we going to react to that? Because we have forces within that environment that is saying we're going to keep you down, we're going to oppress you, we're going to depopulate you, we're going to do all these different things to you, right? So it's like a battle, it's like a chess match. Well, what am I going to do in response? Am I going to go get drunk? Am I going to go, eat myself into oblivion? Or am I going to do something strategic that's going to counter and go 5 moves ahead of my opponent in order to be successful, in order to win? Because we as Black men, we are supposed to be winners. We are supposed to defeat our opponent. Whether the opponent is a physical entity that you have to go to war with and actually do some battle with your fists and with weapons, or your opponent is something that you have to defeat psychologically. So you have to have that winning mentality, and you have to have a belief in the unseen and the power of that which cannot be seen. The ancestors, the divine forces of nature, that in ancient Kemet, they call them the Neteru. In other parts of Africa, they might use the Orisha. White people call them gods and goddesses. That is not what they are. They are divine forces that operate within the universe. They are forces of nature. We have to believe that these forces of nature can be arrayed to be on our side and to work for us. That we have abilities in our mind. When we practice yoga, we begin to develop abilities that are above and beyond what white psychology, what European psychology tells us is normal. So they call it ESP. They call it extrasensory perception. I call it normalized sensory perception, that abilities that you have, telepathy. Okay, we brothers, we should be able to talk to each other without using no cell phone, because we can communicate with our mind.
Right.
We should be able to predict something that's going to happen in the future, because they call that clairvoyance, right? Now the mainstream European culture, they say, oh, we don't believe in that. That's metaphysics. That's fantasy type of stuff. But the intelligence agencies, the CIA in the US and whatever the Russians are and the Chinese, they all got people being trained to use their mind in these ways. So so these people are warriors. They are using ESP, psychic abilities, to be warriors. How come we can't be warriors? When I sit down and I meditate, I'm not just sitting down and meditate because I want to relax and I feel better because I'm relaxed. My mind is generating thought. My mind is projecting into the universe. My mind is trying to create an idea of something that I can then manifest in a material, crystallized way that's going to actually materialize.
That's great.
That's going to become real. And that's
the things we have to do to make those changes. Thought, bringing those positive thoughts, that energy into our minds and manifesting it out to make ourselves and our communities better. So
let me just say this. There's one more second. We have to study these things in the proper way.
Okay.
We can't just go nilly-willy. There is technique. There are practices that there in every field of endeavor. You have best practices and quality assurance. And so if you don't have best practices, if you're just doing some weird stuff, you're not doing nothing. That's why they had The Secret on Oprah, and they doing all this stuff. And it just, they made all the money. Now they don't went and they don't faded away.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So the right training, which is important. We're an hour and 5 minutes. Quentin, I know you had to go. May have to. Depart.
I have to jump off soon.
Yeah. So, but we're ending. But two things that I wanted to do. I wanted you to talk about, because I know you have a memoir out. I wanted to share that, how people can hear more about your story, but also, and then also about your tea, because you have a business. I want you to promote that. But lastly, the question I want to leave you with is, what's on your mind right now and this question's for both of you. What is on your mind right now as a Black man? And I'll leave it at that.
I'll carry the first two and then answer the third, and then I'll depart. But before I do that, Keith, thank you so much for having me here. Yirser, it's been an honor and a privilege to be in communication and communion, to hear you speak, to hear that reinforcement is definitely it was needed and grateful. There we go. It's needed and definitely grateful and appreciated. So thank you for that. Thank you for this time in this space. Memoir, Strong in the Broken Places. You can find it anywhere books are sold: Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million. Tea company, started a company, Greenhouse Teas, geared toward, wellness and sustainability, right, and accessibility. And you can find that more about that, greenhouseteas.com. Everything is sold exclusively online currently. The last question is, how do I feel as a Black man?
Well, no, what's on your mind right now?
What's on my mind? What's on my mind as a Black man? I think the thing that's on my mind right now as a Black man is the same thing that's always on my mind. And it's, sustainability, right? We are, as Black men, we are hunted in this country. And we are dying from being murdered by, police officers, or killing ourselves in our health, right? And not doing the things necessary to take care of ourselves. And so for me, it's sustainability and creating legacy, something that is going to last longer than me, and that also exceeds and extends beyond just my family. I have a pretty large family, just welcomed a newborn daughter into this world.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. In March. And, it's for me, it's more than just leaving her with money, right? But it's leaving her in a world, in a society that was much better than it was when I got into it, and so a lot of the work that I do is geared toward making sure that her children have a better existence than I did, making sure that my children have a better existence than I did, and utilizing my experiences, in life to impart some level of wisdom. I'm a firm believer that, wisdom to me is learning from someone else's experience, right? And not having to repeat the cycle just to come to the same end result. And that's my goal, and that's what's on my mind, right? Just creating a level of sustainability and legacy for myself, for my family, and for people that look like me.
Great. I think that's a great way to really leave a legacy, and I think you are moving towards that with just how you're living for your family, and then also your business. So I thank you for being on tonight, and I know you got your other endeavor, so we wish you well.
Thank you so much.
All right, now
salute.
Okay. And so, Yirser, you have the last word. Just a little bit about you and how if people want to follow, your yoga you're teaching? Is there a way to do that online or in the area? And then what is on your mind as a Black man?
Well, for what I'm doing right now is, I'm doing a lot of different things. Some things I like to, some things I talk about in public, some things I don't talk about in public.
Okay.
Because I don't want to, it's it's nothing wrong with. I just like to, keep certain things under wraps.
Yeah, no worries.
That I manifest them, right?
Right.
But if people are really interested in what we're doing, they can just go to the website, Kinetic Yoga Skills, KEMETIC, Yoga, YOGA Skills, SKILLS, KineticYogaSkills.com. And they can see what we're doing. We do online courses to train people to become yoga instructors. It's cheaper to do the course online, and we help you to learn skills that you can start your business with in terms of being a yoga instructor, in terms of being a wellness, sort of like a wellness coach, a holistic advisor to people to help them with their overall health and well-being, stress management, nutrition. We incorporate all of those things into our courses, as well as understanding the history and the philosophy of ancient Kemet and the metaphysical and spiritual aspects of it. So we have our online courses. We have our retreats and trainings that we do in Jamaica and that we do in Egypt. We're doing a teacher training course in Jamaica from July 20th until the 29th. I think, 20th to the 29th. And then we are going to take a trip to Egypt, working with my friends, Jabari and Anika Osaze, who are Kemetic priests. And they have a organization called I'm probably saying it wrong, Institution for the it's for the restoration of my eye. I forget. I don't know. I think I'm saying it wrong. I'm saying the name wrong, but it has restoration of my eye in it. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing a trip together, historic trip to Kemet together, a tour where we're going to go to all the different temples, all the different pyramids.
Oh wow!
All the different main sites. Also, in November we do a teacher training course in Egypt also. So that's what I do that mm-hmm. alone, and it also involves a tour. So that's November 24th until December 5th. And we are expanding our operations into Brazil. When the COVID breaks a little bit more, we're going to be doing more things in Brazil. We're going to be doing more things in Africa, especially like in Ghana, Gambia, in terms of getting land to do retreats, to build retreat centers and to just to develop community places where people can come and acquire land where they can grow their own food and things like that. Those are things we're trying to do. We're trying to do some nation building stuff, not just things.
Not just yoga, nation building. Okay.
Yeah. Because yoga, to me, yoga is the foundation of ancient Africa. It's the foundation of African civilization. Because if you think about it, this idea of transformation, this idea of using the mind, because people keep confusing yoga with all these different positions and stuff, right? But the main part of yoga is the mind. How do I develop my mind? And so that's what I'm always vibing on. How can I create from my consciousness something that is going to be sustainable and movable? So people, I get into it with people sometimes because they're so concrete. They focus on, they doing this, COVID this, that, and the other. It's not all of these different things, right? It's like whatever they doing, they're going to always be doing something. and you may be interpreting what they're doing correctly, or you may not. But you keep your own self focused on what you're gonna do, and you're creating your own reality. So I don't care what they're doing. When it gets to the point where it's affecting me in a direct way, then I'll deal with it. But in the meantime, I'm always moving forward. I'm like, and I consider myself to be, and I'm not trying to be egotistical, but I consider myself to be invincible. Not to say I can't die, will never die, but my attitude, right? I cannot be defeated.
Right.
And my thing is like, the worst thing they could do to me is kill me. But if they kill me, my spirit is going to live on. So I'm going to still become victorious.
Right.
So it don't make no difference. So we just keep on pushing. We don't become distracted by all of these different things that's going on that everybody is so upset, everybody is so stressed out about. They stay on the path. All things will change and evolve. But if you just keep on your path, you're not going to have a problem.
Great. So is that what's on your mind right now, or is there something else?
That's what's on my mind. What's on my mind is that we don't need to become distracted, by BS. We always, you hear all these conspiracy things and they doing this. It's like, man, just go on and take care of business. Create your wealth.
Right.
Stop looking at what's on my mind, and stop looking at the negative and look at the positive. I believe in a strength-based analysis, not a weakness-based analysis. I want to build upon my strengths. I don't want to focus on, I don't have this, I don't have that. What can I do with what I have?
Right.
So that's what's on my mind. That's what's been on my mind for the last 46 years that I've been doing this. And also, what's also on my mind is that we need to have analysis of what's going on that is balanced and nuanced. We can't just lump everything together and say they all the same. Everything is the same. Don't make no difference, right? Because different things have different things. I have some orange juice in here, and I have some water in here. They're both liquids, but they're not the same thing. So you have to have an analysis that's able to differentiate between now and the past, and this one over here and this one over there, because they're not if you're lazy and just say everything is the same, then you're not having a proper analysis to be able to create a strategy that's going to be successful, because you don't know what you're working with or working against, or what's working against you. So because you're thinking everything is just, nothing makes a difference. So that's what I'm thinking.
Well, that was great. I have to say, it was truly enlightening. The energy that is within you and that you gave us this evening was truly fantastic. So I thank you for being on tonight, and I wish you well.
But thank you, brother Keith Dent, and I appreciate you having me. And I want to say to everybody that's watching on Uja Sanel, which means life, health, and prosperity.
Thank you. Life, health, and prosperity to you as well.
Yes.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Well, I have to say that was truly an enlightening, especially the opportunities to, one, go within. So if you have, and to kind of tie it back to tonight, which was about yoga and healing, if you can breathe, you can do yoga. And we need to start breathing more so we can go within and start to make the changes that we need to make individually and also in our communities. So I'd like to thank Yirser Ra Hotep as well as Quentin Vennie being on the show tonight, and all of you that listened tonight. Think about yoga. Yoga is not about the stretching is about deep breathing. So if you can breathe, you can do yoga. So hope everyone enjoyed the show tonight. If you did miss it, you'll be able to catch the podcast, which will be a week later. And then, which is a treat for us, we'll have back-to-back shows. We'll have another live show next week, and we'll be talking about the marijuana issue. In New Jersey, they passed the law to allow recreational marijuana. But as you know, may not know, the Black community may be missing out on that, and we're going to talk about it. And we should have some great guests. So if you haven't, this is your first time listening to our live stream podcast, please share it. This is a great show tonight, and I'd love to just share. Subscribe to the Black Men Speak live stream or the podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great night.